Welcome everyone. Welcome back to Cyber Talk with Nikolay show. And today's episode we're gonna be talking about leadership. Where does it start? Where does it end? Or does it ever end? And we have our guest speaker Malcolm Harkins, and he had a very interesting career. Where he started and how he ended up in cybersecurity, and his career path took him many twists and turns. And I think it would be a really interesting episode for us to dig into it and hear from Malcolm how he got to where he's at and what are special moments were in his career. So I'm gonna turn over right now to Malcolm, give him a little bit moment of introduction, then we start with a few questions, and whatever Malcolm can share with us would be greatly appreciated.
Hey, thanks,
Malcolm.
Nikolay. Great to be here and have this conversation with you. So, for those that don't know me, I am currently Chief Security and Trust Officer with the early stage cybersecurity company, Epiphany Systems. Been with the company since we launched about 18, 20 months ago. Dabbled in and around with a couple other startups over the past several years. Most notably, I was Chief Security and Trust Officer with Silence before it was bought by BlackBerry. And then prior to that, my life was pretty simple. I was at Intel for 24 years. And I eventually became worldwide chief security and privacy officer, overseeing all the typical IT stuff, but also product security and corporate emergency management, a few other things.
Great, Malcolm. So one thing that comes to mind, and when I was thinking about this episode, I was watching videos of Steve Jobs, and when he was getting his career started in Apple computers, and he picked up the phone called HP, and that he was trying to build a counter, and they gave him internship jobs this summer. So he actually talked to the CEO that there's a 11 years old guy trying to build a counter, and if they had any spare parts, so that his career took in that direction, and he was surprised at people not doing it. Like from your point of view, or you've been at Intel for a very long time, and obviously you didn't start there as a CFO, you got there. So how did it start, and were there any moments that you can share to say, yes, here's a certain things that happened in my life, and that they one thing led to another things, and then we had open mind or different things, because again, some people, they have notion that certain things has to be provided for them, or how they happen and how leadership happen, and many people don't realize that leadership doesn't happen just because you have people. It happens just because you can do things, you can lead things, and you can create and invent or move the company forward and show your leadership skills, and that's what you've been recognized of.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't actually intend to go work for Intel. So, if I look at my entire career, my my career's kind of happened and evolved because of three things: luck, timing, and execution. Luck worked for me or against me, and when it worked against me, I tried to flip it around. And timing, again, that's that Wayne Gretzky thing: go where the puck is going, not where it's been. And if you get good at timing, you'll get good at creating your own luck. And then the thing that's propelled my career is the ability to execute and get stuff done. But I ended up at Intel more out of circumstance and, again, dumb luck, no different than how I ended up running security. I was at UC Davis in the Graduate School of Management, and while I was working on my MBA in finance and accounting, I was also recruiting companies to recruit the students. And I happened to land the tech whale at the time, Intel, to recruit the MBA students. And day that the resumes were due, the dean and I were going through the students that were supposed to be interviewed, kind of truing it up, because the students were the products that the university, in essence, sold to businesses. And what we wanted to do was make sure we had the right lineup so that they would come back and recruit the students. And so we had an open interview slot, and the dean made me put my resume in the stack, which then got me the first set of interviews. The second set of interviews, I was actually on my way to San Francisco to hopefully finalize a job offer to be assistant vice president of international finance for a large bank. And so I was hardcore down the financial side of things. And I got called back for a second interview, and the dean made me shift out that meeting to go do the second interview. And then one thing led to another. I fell in love with Intel, fell in love with Folsom, California, where I still live. And over a weekend from that Friday for the second interview till the Tuesday that I was going to San Francisco to negotiate the job offer, I had put money down on a house for a job that I didn't intend to take in a city I'd never been in 3 days before for a company I wasn't planning to go work for. Why? Because I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with what I saw about Intel, and I fell in love with the location. And so when Intel called a couple days later and offered me the job in the IT strategic procurement organization, I said yes, and I declined the banking offer. And then that kind of is how my entire career has led. One role after another was more because I put my fingers into something that in some cases wasn't my job, and poking at something that wasn't working, or poking at an opportunity to do something differently, which then caused people to see what I was curious in or see what I was aggravated about. And generally one thing led to another, and I got calls saying, hey, can you go do this? And that's what happened in late 2001 after 9/11 and Code Red and NIMDA, when Intel CIO called me up. He had known me from my time in IT finance, procurement, some business operation stuff, and had asked me to run security and business continuity, not because I knew anything about security, but because I knew enough about the business. And he knew that I was execution oriented, and paint a target, I'll hit the target, and I will marshal everybody to get to it as well. And so that's really what kind of drove, just again out of circumstance, because after those events physically and logically in 2001, when Andy Grove was still running Intel, like his book, Only the Paranoid Survive. But Andy was relentless on things, and he was frankly kicking the crap out of a few corporate officers to deal with those physical and logical availability risk issues that presented themselves. And the CIO wanted somebody who could help him do it and would also be strong-willed enough that if Andy came to beat you up, I could beat back appropriately, but make sure we were delivering what the shareholders in the business needed to better manage and mitigate risks.
Interesting. So you started initially, and you mentioned a few things that when you were trying to sort of get yourself involved, and when things were not working, you were trying to get them work, make them work, and do things like that. So were you actively seeking for those things, or were you just happens, hey, I need to do my finance job and there is a bunch of things not working, and okay, I'll just step up and ask questions and get people annoyed, and then if they're not
Yeah,
going to fix it, I'll try to fix it.
anybody who I've ever reported to would probably attest to the fact that I can be quite annoying, particularly upwards or sideways. So when I see something that's not working, I get frustrated with it. I poke, I prod, I push. And if I get brushed away and I think it's important enough to be fixed, let's just say I don't go away easily. And so I can be quite loud. And so I think in many cases, the reason why a lot of the jobs that I was given was to shut me up and say, well, okay, Malcolm, you think it's such a big blankety blank problem? You go fix it. Okay, fine, give it to me. I'll go fix it. And so I developed that reputation fairly early in my career as a recent college grad. And again, it didn't matter to me what it was. If I had visibility to it and it was an important item and it wasn't getting done, even if it was my boss in front of me that wasn't doing a good enough job, I'd pull them aside and say, move over to the slow lane or get run over. I don't really care which happens, but you're slowing me down and I've got a mission. And you're not moving fast enough on yours. So, like I said, I did that enough that again, I developed a bit of a reputation for, I was harsh in some ways, particularly upwards. And to some extent still am today. And I think one of the things that employees typically don't do is hold their managers accountable, hold their leaders accountable. I've always had a tendency to do that. And I think I've also tried to give the free rein to the people who've reported to me to hold me accountable and whack me upside the head if necessary. If I'm not doing what I need to do to execute the mission that we've been given and enable them to do theirs.
Got it, got it. So that's kind of interesting. So you didn't really feel, how would I say it, bad when you were asking all those things, and were you pushing to accomplish, well, I wouldn't say bad the word, but you didn't feel that there will be some pushback from the management to say, hey, Malcolm, stop being annoying, and we also need to get the job done, so
Oh,
you're not the only one.
that happened occasionally and still does, but no, it doesn't. It doesn't. I've never been shy of that. I'd be the person in the back of the room as the junior finance person with these layers of management all around tables, and I was in the back of the back of the back of the room, and some director who reported to the CIO was presenting a strategy, and I would say, "Excuse me, I got a question." And everybody turned like, "Who the hell are you, and why are you asking that question?" And I would state my question, and if they didn't give me a sufficient answer, I would drill into them. And that's what ended up causing a couple CIOs and stuff like that. When I just got invited once out of politeness to go, I want this guy in the room because he's going to ask a question and he's going to hold people accountable. If it doesn't make sense, he's going to drill into it until it does, or find out that what's being said is frankly a bunch of bullshit. And so I developed that reputation early, and again, with hopefully some level of respect, but there was times where I certainly could come across as disrespectful. I had in a strategy review as again a junior person that I was presenting at a corporate strategic discussion to Intel's executive staff in late 1995. Andy Grove, loved him to death, learned a lot, but he was impatient. And to some extent, I learned that impatience from being at Intel. But he started coming after me, question after question after question, 3 slides into a hour and a half presentation. And I eventually was like, Andy, can you just shut up for a minute? Let me build a base of knowledge. And if I don't provide the education, then come after me. But you're asking questions, jumping 10 slides ahead, and I need to build a base of knowledge for something you guys don't understand that I have spent a lot of time on. So just hold your horses a moment. You could heard a pin drop in that executive staff room. And Andy quietly smiled, looked a little bit irritated, nodded, got through the next couple slides. I said, you got your questions answered? He's like, yep. He's like, keep going. And I did. Literally that next morning, it was December 12th, 1995, if I remember the date correctly. And, Intel did these corporate strategic reviews. They were pole position slots that corporate officers would really push to be in a CSD and have a real strategic topic that their organization was representing and discussing at the company level. And I was doing it for the IT organization, yet I wasn't an IT person. I was a finance person. But I was a finance person, supporting the IT organization. And, that next morning, Andy Grove sent a note to the CIOs and said, that was the best strategic discussion we've had all year. Couldn't have asked for anything more. You get stuff like that, after you've been a little bit, frankly, aggressive on stuff. It's again, that was that early culture that I fell in love with at Intel the first day that I was on site and met people for some interviews, and that was who I was naturally. But that kind of forged me further to being a little bit more assertive, borderline aggressive on things. Doesn't work in some cultures. It does in others.
Got it, got it. So you just mentioned about Intel culture. Was it allowed? Well, I wouldn't say allowed. Was so much inclusive that people were freely asking questions, and some were reserving questions, and you were pretty much going with whatever you had in mind. Hey, I want to make a change, and I want to understand better, and I want to be productive and effective for this company. So I need to know what the heck you guys doing, rather than sit back. It's like, okay, great slides, and let's move on to next meeting.
I'm going, if you want me here, it's because you want me to question, you want me to learn. The only way I know how to do that is to ask questions and be engaged. It's not a spectator sport. But there was other things that fueled me. I mean, I grew up in a low to barely middle income location. I needed to change my trajectory. I wanted to hockey stick my career. And, who's the competition? Everybody else around you. I needed to out hustle, outperform, out execute, outthink. It's like, I've said this and you've heard me say this on the security side, risk management, it's a contact sport. It's like playing hockey, right? And you're checking people into the glass, and, it is what it is, but I'll do that. Hopefully not in an unsportsmanlike fashion, though I've probably unfortunately done that a couple times too. And when I've done that, I've paid the performance penalty, in my reviews, and to some extent been held back a couple times because I was a little bit too assertive. But I don't think you move your career if you're timid.
That's probably true. So, based on what you just said, do you have any regrets for anything that you were doing at Intel as far as on your career progression, or you would say maybe if I stopped at some places, it would have been better, but it's hard to tell, right? Cannot go back in time and say, I want to replay it and see how it's going to work out. So you only have one time doing it.
Yeah, no, there's definitely some regrets that I have. But there's also some people that stood out that allowed me to make mistakes and protected me from those mistakes and coached and performance managed me to be better. One of them's Doug Bush, the CIO, who called me up and said, "Hey, Malcolm, I need you to run security and business continuity." I can be, again, aggressive. There was prior management and people around that, frankly, in my opinion, didn't execute well, perpetuated go along to get along attitude. And as I was trying to put my arms around stuff, I got highly frustrated on a lot of things. And I was like a bull in a china shop. And, Doug, if I was the bull with sharp horns, Doug allowed me to run into him all the time. And it taught me, to some extent, a little bit more patience. And I learned a lot from him in doing that. So when I saw, that in others, I would allow people to do it to me because that was the easiest way to protect them from damaging others to some extent. And hopefully, allow them to get out some of that energy and change to some extent some subtleties sometimes in their perspective or approach. My default, though, is I know I can be a bit of a bull in a china shop. Like I said, anybody that I've ever reported to will know that, and they tell you the same thing. I've had my managers at startups talk to some old executives that I worked at Intel for, and got on a call, and the stories that they'll go, "Hey, well, Malcolm can be a little bit of an acquired taste because he will certainly tell you what he's thinking. You might not like it." But that's who I am. And if people don't want that, then that's not an environment that's suited for me because I'm not going to help them. But if they want somebody who's going to literally really dig in and put themselves on the line, share their perspectives, and really be all in to fulfilling the mission of the company and the mission of the job, and not let anything get in the way of it, that's why I got pulled into so many things.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 on Cyber Talk with Nikolay and with our host, Malcolm Harkins, discussing our leadership. And please stay tuned for part 2.
Thank you for listening. For more information, please go to www.issquaredinc.com.